Hey everyone, my name's Robin and welcome to my house. I've had a few requests from people to do a bit of a house tour and show all the changes that I've made over the past few years. And considering I'm moving home for good in the next few weeks, I thought I'd better get onto this. So if you're interested in seeing all the changes that I've made to the house since the beginning of 2014, stick around. The first major bit of work that I did in the house was to add this bit of lawn and garden bed here. When I originally moved in, there was a garden bed that started from this point and went all the way down to the end of the yard. And this was basically just covered in trees. There was a giant conifer here, went all the way up to the roof, and all around here were these big, really thick bushes and trees. And one of the problems with that was this is the bedroom window here, and there was practically no light that came in at any time. What was nice about it though was that in summer it kept it nice and cool, but in the winter it was miserable. So the first thing we did was cut all of this out and basically lay some new turf. This tree is the original tree, and you can see the way there's no foliage down at the bottom. And that's because this was competing for space. This was entirely covered by bushes. So as soon as I chopped them out, this thing just took off, which has been amazing because it stops the afternoon sun. But yeah, this thing was on its last legs when we pulled everything out. So I'm pretty happy that it's come back to life. So practically all the grass that you see here is new. There's a small section there that isn't, but most of this grass has been pulled up, or the weeds, I should say, have been pulled up and new grass has been laid down. I put in a bit of edge banding around there, turned this into a proper garden, and it's just basically created more space in the yard. Because that's the thing, from the street, when you see a garden that's literally chopped off here, from the street you don't see anything here, so you just see a very small garden. This has just made everything so much bigger, and it looks so much more inviting, just because it's got a lot more space to it. Now, while I was getting that garden bed sorted out, at the same time I was building this fence. Now, my neighbor is a carpenter, and he basically showed me exactly how to do this, and this was the start of really learning, you know, the art of building things. So this was the first proper big project that I tackled. Simple things like running string lines, I'd never done that before, and I would never have been able to learn those things if it wasn't for the help of my neighbor. So this basically, there was no fence in this yard at all, so we put this up. It's the same design as his fence, just painted a different color so that, you know, there is a bit of separation. But it's a very, very simple, straightforward fence. Now that I've done it once, you know, I could easily do it again because it is a fairly straightforward build. But had I not built this, I don't think I ever would have had the cojones to tackle any of the other projects, because the amount of stuff that I learned in this project was just crazy. There was so much stuff that I didn't know until I built this fence. So this is where it all started. This was the first building project that I tackled, and again, it just added a lot of value to the house. The nice thing about putting on a fence, while a lot of people will argue that what you're doing is you're closing off the house, you're also giving the garden a boundary, which people like. It's got a bit of security, but more just it's got some definition. And from that point of view, I think it was a good idea to add this. Also, we have a dog, so the idea is now that the dog can run around in the front yard if it wants. Then not too long after doing the fence, the next thing was this deck. This basically covered the concrete. We've got a concrete driveway, and that just flowed around up to the porch. So this got put on, a very simple project, but it just gave a little bit of softness to the house because it was pretty barren out here. It's just nice to have timber. So this, again, neighbor helped out with this, learned so much on this project. Basically everything in the front yard was where I learned all of the tips and tricks. So yeah, it's a very simple pine deck. If I'm honest, probably wouldn't build pine again. It hasn't lasted very well, but it does have to stand up to massive abuse out here. It's full sun all day long, and the rain gets it as well. So really, considering it is a softwood, I guess it's not done too badly. And then last up was to do this path and this patio. So this path is actual sandstone, and what was nice was that we got to use a really nice piece of stone because it was such a short walkway. There wasn't any path here before, so you basically just had to walk up over the grass, which obviously wasn't great, or you'd come in up the drive and then walk over the concrete into the house, but there was no pedestrian walkway. So this was put in, and then This patio was a concrete patio, painted concrete. So these pavers were put on with tile adhesive, and there was no edging done, just as is, and they look great. They were such an improvement over that painted concrete, which just looks so dull and outdated. So yeah, this was the first time that I learned how to tile, or the tiling process, and this pathway was the first time that I learned how to pave. This bench was one of the earliest woodworking projects that I got into. This was way before YouTube. Not the first, we'll get to that later, but it was one of the earlier ones. And the joinery that I've used for this is absolutely Neanderthal. It's it's interesting to look at it now, because it really is shocking. Completely over-designed. The way the legs attached to the base is completely over-engineered, and you know, I mean, I guess the best part is that it's held together and it's never going to come apart, but it weighs a ton. It still looks pretty good. I'm still pretty happy with it, and it's weathered quite nicely as well, considering it's outdoors 24/7. But yeah, it definitely taught me that you don't need to put in 500 nails and 500 screws to hold something together. A few weeks ago, you would have seen this flower box get built, but this was the OG. This was the original box that I made, again, before YouTube. These are solid. They're 90 by 90 mil, which I think is a 4x4, and the inside's been hogged out to allow the slats to slide into. So it's a really nice design. Just a little bit of oil, and it's aged really nicely. And the idea with this window box was that I wanted it to complement this, which is why it's a similar color. I couldn't get it exactly the same, but it's similar anyway. So running up the wall, I made a lattice at the same time with this. It's a Lady Di, I think it's called, which is an Australian climber. And for the first year, it did nothing. I didn't think that it was ever going to grow. And just recently, it's just taken off. And now I'm continually having to cut it to stop it from growing into the roof. But this is a great thing. I really like the idea of creating different levels in a garden. It really gives it a nice look and a nice feel. Alright, so that's basically everything in the front yard that I want to mention. To be fair, pretty much every surface out here has been touched at some point, so the front yard that we originally had is completely different. But those are the main building projects. From here, we're going to head inside. And this is my lounge. Now, there's not been a huge amount of changes to this room. For the most part, everything was really fun. The biggest thing that I remember about this room was the red wall when we moved in. Now that we've sold it, prior to going to the market, we decided to paint it white just to keep everything neutral, because it was quite a quite a startling color. I liked it, but you know, you've got to keep things as neutral as possible when you are selling. So that's definitely something that I'll always remember this house by, is that bright blood red wall as you walked in the front door. So as I say, not much in terms of building changes, but this room does hold the first woodworking project that I ever attempted. And this is it. This was originally designed to be a coffee table, but it turned into something to hold the TV. It's made entirely out of pine pellets, and it was the first table that I ever made. This was way back before I got into YouTube, and it was before I believed in the idea of wood glue, purely because I just didn't believe that a wood glue bond could be as strong as a mechanical fastener. So this is made entirely out of screws, brass screws, and there is not a single piece of glue in the entire thing. So it works, it's functional, and if the house was ever to come crashing down on us, I'd be diving under this because it's so incredibly solid. But as I said, the joinery is about as basic as you can get. It's finished with a water-based polyurethane, because at that stage I hadn't started using oils, so I wasn't sure of how to use them or the benefits of them, you know, in terms of bringing the grain out. And it is extremely over-engineered. There are so many supports and struts and far too many screws. The whole point was that at that stage I hadn't worked out the strength of timber and how, you know, where the limit was and sort of what you can and can't do. So everything is like doubled up in terms of support. So it's really solid, but it's also just very, very crude. But at the end of the day, this is my first woodworking project. It's the first thing I ever made. It's made of pellets, so it's hideous, but this will travel with me around the world wherever I go as a bit of a reminder of where this whole woodworking journey started. So other than that, everything is really cosmetic in this room. We've got the fireplace mantle, which you would have seen a couple weeks ago, maybe a couple months ago. There's the folding table, which I did a video about not too long ago. This is a second-hand pine mirror, which I stained dark. Basically, the idea was to have a white room with dark wood, just to keep it a bit modern and a little bit stylish. There's a coats rack on the wall made of jarrah, stained very dark. And then over here is another table, again very crude. I think that might have actually been the second or third table that I made. So it was still very functional over good looks. But all in all, that is the lounge. And this is the second bedroom of the house, not the master. We'll get to that in a second. For the most part, this has been used as an office. I work from home, so I've needed basically a space to work 9 to 5, and this has been it. At the moment, it's set up as a bedroom for the open house, because what we learned is that if you have any spare rooms, you should set them up as bedrooms. And the reason for that is people accept what a bedroom looks like, and when they can see that there's a bed in here, their mind immediately goes, all right, there's that much space in this room. If you don't have a bed in here, then people struggle to visualize what they're looking at. Now, in terms of this room, there hasn't been a huge number of changes, but what we did do is put some of the nice furniture in here. So this tree slice side table went in, and the concrete and copper lamp. Both of these had videos that you might have seen before. During the whole selling process, I had a couple of people mention to me that they really liked this lamp. And these are people who didn't know that I was a maker or doing YouTube. And it's a real nice notch on the belt when someone who doesn't know that you're a designer or a maker picks up on something that they don't know that you've made and sort of comments on the fact that they think it's a really nice piece. So with that in mind, this type of design, this type of industrial look is something that I'm thinking of pursuing a bit further in the future, because it seems to be a very desirable look. It's been quite a while since I painted this guitar, and to date I still get a lot of people talking about two main things on the video. The first one is, does it change the tone of the guitar? And what I say to people is, for my ear, it hasn't. And I think that's got to do with the fact that this is a relatively inexpensive guitar. If you were to put paint onto some expensive Takamine or something like that, you might notice a difference. This is a few $100s, it's a cheaply made guitar, so adding paint to it hasn't changed anything to my ear. And because of the level that the guitar was, I just don't think it's had that much of an impact. The other thing that people have commented on is how has the paint lasted? How long would painting it like this last? And to date, I've had one tiny nick on the top here, but that was because I bumped into something. Other than that, this paint has lasted fantastically well. It's funny, it's actually lasted better than I thought it would while I was doing the video. So all in all, if there's anything that this video taught me, is that if you clean the surface properly before applying paint, then the paint sticks to it like glue. And one last thing, you might have noticed the IKEA furniture behind me. That was before I got into woodworking, so if you're gonna judge, just go easy. So next up is the master bedroom, and while I call this a master bedroom, there's not really anything that defines it as a master bed other than this wardrobe, but there's no ensuite. The only reason we use it as the master bedroom is because A, it faces out the front, which is a really nice view, and I prefer the idea of being at the front of the house while asleep as opposed to the quieter back side. So no big changes in this room. Like all the other rooms in this house, it has been painted for when we did the sale. There was a crack that ran through the bricks down this wall that I fixed in a video on the other side in the lounge. It wasn't anything major, it was just the house has moved over the 60 years that it's been around, and so, you know, that crack formed in the plaster. So other than that, the only other thing worth mentioning are these bedside tables. This bed I bought originally before moving into the house, and then I made these bedside tables and stained them to match the bed. So this is all from pallets. It's again mostly pine, but this was the first time that I used a hardwood on this base over here. And when you start getting into woodworking, you generally start with softwoods because they're more accessible and they're cheaper. And I'd heard and watched videos about how much better hardwood was, but I didn't really know that much about it at that stage. But it's incredible to see on these pieces, which are now probably 3 or 4 years old, how the hardwood shelf at the bottom has barely moved and it still looks great, whereas the softwood areas, they've shrunk, their glue joint is split where they've contracted, because obviously in these, in these early projects I wasn't too worried about allowing timber to move. And it just shows you why hardwood is generally considered the better option, because this still looks as good as the day I made it, whereas the softwood, yeah, it's just it's all over the place. But that's all for the bedroom. Next we're going to go across to the bathroom, and I've got a very, very cool story about that to show you guys. So this is the only bathroom in the entire house, and it's the one room that I really wanted to tackle, and I came so close to tackling it, but I just ran out of time. So it's unfortunately exactly the same as it was when I moved in, obviously minus the coat of paint on the walls. But there was one change that I had to make to it, and that involves telling a story that involves some pretty nasty bugs. So if you don't like to hear about stuff like that, skip forward, otherwise, here we go. So all the rooms in this house have these vents at the top of the walls, and from what I've researched, these were to help with gas, because there was a lot of gas heating, so it allowed air to flow through. And this would have originally been an external wall, so it would have allowed the double cavity wall here to breathe a little bit. Now there used to be 2 vents up here, and that's going to make sense in a while. So about a couple of years ago, I'm in the bathroom, and it's starting to get a bit of a smell, and I can't work out what the smell is. So I go through all the normal processes, try a bit of drain cleaner, that didn't work, try with a plunger to try and clean out the drain, maybe there's something stuck in there, and nothing was working. I tried everything to get these drains clean, and it still smelled. And I was like, what's going on? What's causing this smell? And the one day I'm standing in the bath, I jump in the bath, and I'm showering, because this is a shower bath combo, so I'm standing in there, under there, and I'm showering. And the next thing, I look at down at my feet, and there's a couple of maggots in the base of the bath. And I think, oh, that's strange, maybe that's got something to do with the drains being blocked, because there must be maggots in the drain. So I try cleaning out the drain again, and everything's fine, and I wake up the next morning, and there's still maggots there, and I'm thinking to myself, I've put enough bleach down there to kill a small army of people, let alone some maggots. So I'm standing here and I'm thinking to myself, what's going on? And I look up, and at the vent in the wall, I can see a little maggot coming out of the vent, and it crawls out and drops and lands in there. So now I've got to say, I'm not a huge fan of bugs. But I'm generally okay. But just the thought of standing in the shower with these maggots potentially coming down, oh, that gave me the creeps. Anyway, so now we realize that there must be something up in this vent, and I went up and had a look at it, and immediately when I put my face up there, I could tell straight away that was where the smell was coming from. So the only way to get in there was to actually break the vent cover off. But these aren't vent covers; these are actual bricks with holes in them. So I had to smash this thing open, eventually broke it open, and there inside was a mouse or a small rat that had died. Maggots had popped out of it, and it was rotting, and that's where the smell was coming from. So the only way to fix it was to break that out, pull everything out, which was absolutely horrific. And then all I did after that was then cover up the 2 vents, plaster over it, which was my first plastering job, and then paint over it, so now you can't see it. There's no real need for that, for those vents now, because this is now an internal wall, and at the end of the day, if there's a hole on the other side, it allows the double cavity to breathe. But that smell is something that I can't even describe how bad that was. It every now and then, like it's like that smell is imprinted on my brain, and every now and then I get like a whiff of it back, and it just turns my stomach. It is the worst thing I've ever smelled. So the one good thing that came out of the story is I learned how to plaster, and I had to learn how to plaster, and I'm pretty sure going forward that any more house disasters or stuff with bugs and creepy crawlies are never really going to amount to what I had to deal with that dead mouse. Because even just talking about this is making me feel queasy. And this is the kitchen. Now, this is probably the newest room in the whole house. I think this kitchen was put in place about 10 or 12 years ago, so obviously before we moved in, but in relation to everything else in this house, it's pretty new. There's been a couple of changes though that I've made. I got an electrician to install this light. This is a real nice modern looking fixture. It's really big and bold, and it's really modernized the kitchen a little bit. The only thing that I don't like, and why I would never use these alone again, is that it directs this amazing amount of light straight down here or onto the bench, but anywhere else in the room is fairly dark. So what would have been nice is if I'd got a couple of downlights in the ceiling as well as that. It would have just lit the kitchen that little bit better. The other addition that I made was this bench top. Now, this bench top was originally a couple of timber sleepers from out in the backyard when I originally moved in. They had rotted away, the garden was falling apart, and one of the first things that I did was to fix that corner garden. And basically I flattened it, I pulled out a big palm tree that was in there. I'll put some pictures up later. And I got these sleepers out. They were completely wet, of course, because they'd been sitting in the rain pretty much their entire lives. So I let them dry out. This was the first time that I remember using glue, and I glued them together, and that was it. That's all that's been done to them. But because they're fairly thick, they really hold their mass well, and because they're obviously not under any real tension, they're fine. It's not like they've tried to move out of place or anything like that. But what's been so nice is the fact that the color matches the floor quite well. It's a similar kind of yellowy golden pine color. But also is that they bring a little bit of extra timber into the kitchen. So this used to be a steel breakfast bar, which was nice. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. That's brushed stainless steel. But this brings a little bit more timber into the room, which just makes it feel so much nicer and warmer, and it really complements this house's cottage feel, that real old style cottage feel. So this has been a real nice thing. My wife actually talked about, should we remove this when we leave because it's such a nice piece of timber. But the best thing about this is each one of these sleepers costs $15 maybe, and there's 2 of them. So for $50 you can get a really nice bench like this, just with quite a bit of elbow grease to get that smooth finish, but completely worth it. One other thing that I forgot to mention was this under cabinet lighting. Now this was quite a simple project. It's the stick-on LED strips, and it comes with a plug. So all I did was had to wire the plug into the cabinet, through the cabinet down and into the plug. So you don't need to be an electrician to do this. But what's really nice is that this allows you to use sort of dedicated lighting without lighting up the whole room. Now I know that might sound crazy, but for myself, I like the idea of having a purpose lit room. So I like ambient lighting. I don't just want to stick a giant fluorescent tube in here and light the whole thing up. So this functional lighting is fantastic, and I will, in the next house that I work on, what I really want to do is I'll wire this into one of the main switches, or have a dedicated switch here. This whole using it on the plug, I mean, it works, but it's just not particularly stylish or flash. You really want to have a light socket built in. But that's definitely something that I'll be looking at in the next house that I move into. And then from the kitchen, we come into what I can say without a doubt was my biggest renovating challenge, and because of that, my favorite part of the house. This is an entranceway. Behind me is the laundry and the toilet. So this would have originally been an outside area. You walk through the house, there was a back door over here that you would have opened up, come outside, you would have been exposed to elements, open this door and walk through to the toilet. But then the owners before me, or possibly before that, put this cement sheet around here and closed it in, which just was a great idea because you've added extra space to the house essentially. The work that I did in here was to give it a paint job, fix up the trim, do the skirting, add this door. Now this door was a really big project for me. I've never hung a door before. I got really lucky in that the jamb was pretty square and the door fitted in really easy with just a little bit of manipulation of the actual timber. But it was a real nice project, A, because it was a much better or a bigger improvement on the door that was here originally, one of those old 70s, 80s doors with like a frosted pane of glass, real ugly, and because it was mostly timber, there was very little light in here. But it was also just a project that I've seen so many times on YouTube, so to actually be able to tackle it was great. And as I say, because it was a success, it just made it even better. Now behind me here is the window into the shower, and this had to be all sealed up because when we originally moved in here, this window was open and it was great for airing out the bathroom. What we found was happening quite often is that the water would then get through the seal and run down here, and we'd end up with pools of water. And it took us ages to work out where this water was coming from. And yes, we had to seal it up, which is unfortunate because that was a nice way to get a bit of a breeze through into the bathroom or into the shower. But as I say, we just couldn't handle the constant water dripping down there. Then I'll pick you guys up and bring you into the laundry. Oops. And this is where all the real magic happened. So this old laundry had nothing in it. Well, what was in here was pretty average. So we had our washing machine here, and there was one of these old stainless steel or zinc tubs that mounted onto the wall, and that was pretty much it. So basically I gutted the whole room, the whole thing got emptied out, minus this wall. There was actually a gap above this wall, so I had to put in a whole extra bit of wall there. And the reason for that is you would go into the toilet, and if you forgot to close this door, anyone in the kitchen would be able to hear what's going on in here. Not exactly fantastic for privacy. So the whole place got gutted, and then everything had to get brought back in. So I put in these floor cabinets and these wall cabinets, and they just added so much storage. The funny thing is though, is we've never really used them, because when you start doing these sort of projects yourself, you'll realize that everything is about storage. Storage, storage, storage. That's what everyone wants. So you build all this storage in your house and you realize that for two people, you actually never get to use it. But that said, it's obviously, you know, it raises the value. So put in the floor cabinets, put on this top that my neighbor gave to me. They've got a brand here in Australia called Caesar stone. And it's basically the same sort of stuff. It's an engineered stone. So they use some kind of resin, and I think it's quartz, but I'm not sure. But basically, super hard, great stuff. Cut a hole into the top of it to drop this tub in. This is it's like one of those cast iron tubs. But what's nice is because it's white, it sort of doubles as a laundry tub, because it's quite big. But as I said, because it's white, it gives you that impression that you are in a bathroom, because it looks a bit more like a bathroom vanity. So it's great because this is, while it is a laundry, it's also the second vanity in the house. And obviously, when you're using the toilet, you come in here, and that's your sink. So put this on, absolutely transformed the place. Gave it a lick of paint. What else? Splashback. So let me take a step back. One of the main things for this project was the tiling. So I mentioned earlier that outside on the front porch, I did that tiling of the pavers. And that was a learning process in that I figured out how to actually attach tiles to the floor. But in terms of the process and the way you work, for example, from the inside out, all those things really took shape in this project. Originally what was here was a concrete floor painted, similar to the front porch, and that was basically all the way from this wall through to the kitchen. Where the floor met the wall, you had this curve, and I assume that's just the way they did it back then. But to get the tiles to join at 90 degrees, I had to get a grinder and grind a line all the way along and sort of cut that corner back in. Other than that, it was pretty straightforward. Using the grinder, I sort of got all the paint off the floor, tile adhesive down. These things are stuck on there really good. But if there's one thing that I would have changed, it's these tiles. They feel great underfoot because they have a bit of texture. But the problem is, because of their texture, they pick up dirt like anything, and they're like an off-white. So they looked fantastic for the first month, but now they just have that constantly dirty look. And we've scrubbed them like with a mop and a brush. We've given them the run over, and they still just pick up dirt like crazy. So next time, it's grey tiles all the way. While we're in the laundry, I want to tell a quick story about, I guess, just the entire process of DIY renovations. So if you're not interested in hearing a story, skip forward a couple minutes like we did earlier. But if you want to hear something that might be inspiring, then continue watching. This project for me was more than just a case of, look what I've created, I've made a thing. And I want to caveat the start of the story by saying that my father is a great man, and I respect him more than anybody else on this planet. But when I was growing up, we extended our house and we got someone in to tile the floors. And I'll never forget my father saying to me, because he was a pretty handy guy, he was a DIY guy, he did a lot of the work himself. But I'll never forget him saying to me, the one thing I will never do is tile, because that you either get right or you get wrong, and if you're not a professional, it's going to look terrible. And I'll always remember that sort of sticking in the back of my head throughout my life, to the point where I remember saying to other people, this was before I owned a home, this was before I'd ever started DIY renovating, saying to other people that I would never tile, because it's one of those jobs that you either get right or wrong, and if you're not a professional, it's not going to work. And basically what it was my dad's advice just flowing straight through me with any sort of thought or reasoning behind it, which is something that you know, I guess your kids do. And that's what I say, this is nothing against my father, he raised us right, but you take those parenting lessons on board, and a lot of the time you just blindly follow them. That's what you do as a child. So when I tackled this, in the back of my head, I remember thinking to myself, this is probably not going to work because I'm not a professional tiler. But I was very lucky that my neighbor, who's a builder, who's obviously done this a million times, came in with the approach of, well, of course you're going to do it yourself. Why would you hire someone to do your tiling? You know, just don't get it wrong. And it was that almost the idea that there was no reason to not do it yourself that sort of spurred me on to give it a go. And I think without that little push, I might never have done it. Now again, as I said, I'm not saying that my father shouldn't have told me not to do that. That was his opinion, and his opinion is his opinion, and he's allowed to have that. But the reason I bring this story up, and the reason the story sticks with me, is you might be looking at a project, you might be looking at something in your house that you want to fix, and in the back of your mind, something or someone is saying you can't do this for whatever reason, and it might even be valid. But if there's anything that DIY renovating has taught me, it's that if you change your approach to how you go into these projects, so instead of looking at it and going, I'm going to get this wrong, or I don't have the skills, or how am I supposed to do this? If you change that whole mindset to this is a learning process. I cannot be a master of this until I get started and start progressing, and sort of have the mentality that it's everything we do in life is we're gaining skills, we're gaining points. That's what this is all about. Then you stop looking at these projects like they're insurmountable, and you start looking at them with I'm going to do this. And it's not like I'm going to do this and it's going to be great. It's I'm going to do this and I'm going to learn so much along the way. And if I get it right, fantastic. If I don't get it right, there's always a way to fix it. But the main thing is that I've learned something along the way. Anyway, inspirational speech over. I just really wanted to share that story with you. That's something that has stuck with me for ages. And it really helps kick me over the line whenever I'm thinking, oh, do I want to do this? Do I want to get involved? Yeah, so if that's helped you, I'm happy. Let's move outside. After the laundry, this was the next major renovation, this entire backyard. When I first moved in, this was all concrete, this floor basically. There was a bit of concrete, some big concrete slabs, and some small pavers. It basically, you could see the whole thing had been patched over time. The problem with it though was that the slopes, the gradients were all incorrect. So in this spot here, you would have pooling. So I remember a couple of occasions at 3 o'clock in the morning coming out with a broom and having to sweep the water out and into the garden bed that was there, because basically this was just filling up with water. So drainage was a massive issue. Over in this corner, I had a galvanized rain tank, which was fantastic, and I think everyone in Australia should have one of these tanks. But it was too big for this yard, so it just didn't make sense to have it in here, and which is why I got rid of it in the end. And it would run off the roof down a pipe into the tank here, but where it came into the tank, it would often get clogged. So you'd have the water running off the roof through the trap, and then it would just start pouring out into this area. Again, it would just sort of like increase that drainage problem, and you would just have this water just filling up in the backyard. It was pretty scary. So one of the big jobs was to cover this concrete, and what was nice is because there was that concrete and paver mix here already, the ground was very stable. So all I had to do was put down a relatively thin layer of road base or gravel, bit of sand, and the pavers over the top. And these pavers are most likely never going to move because there's such a solid base underneath there, which is great. I had a friend of mine help me move these pavers. There was 3.5 tons. I bought them secondhand from someone on the other side of town, hired a van, did 2 trips. It was about 40 degrees on the day. This was the hardest, toughest thing I've ever done, moving these pavers, but the net results, absolutely worth it. One of the other major upgrades to this outdoor area was this pergola. Originally this was all raw timber, and it was like a brownie colored polycarbonate with a layer of shade cloth between that and the purlins. It had been absolutely left to rot. The people who installed it originally didn't run the polycarbonate all the way to the edge of the structure. They stopped at this last rafter for some reason. So you had the water running over, landing on the rafter, and then running into the garden bed, because the garden bed used to be a bit wider. So that last rafter just rotted. The trees on this side of the pergola had just grown over onto the top of it, so you had the tree sitting on it, just holding that moisture on it. So this was basically a lot of the timber was just toast. So all these rafters have been replaced. It's been given a paint job, so it's just going to make it last a little bit longer because the joists are original, and the polycarbonate has been replaced and the shade cloth removed. What's so nice about this now is you come out and you get a little bit of light in here, which is nice, but in the evenings, instead of having a basically solid covering, you still have a sense of there's a bit of space. So for example, when the moon's out, you can actually see it through this polycarbonate, which is nice. As I mentioned earlier, this garden bed was completely different when I moved in. Obviously the pavers weren't here, but there were some timber sleepers that ran sort of across here. They just deleted into the fence. There was a giant palm tree here that I had to get out, that I ended up chainsawing across the top, and then using a ratchet on that tree, just managed to pull it out. And there was also a big oak tree starting, well, when I say big, I mean it was that big, but the neighbors actually asked me to pull it out because it was starting to lift up their fence. So all of this was pretty much redone, and all the plants that have been put in here are completely new. One of the things that I added to this that I really like, and will continue to do this, is this raised garden bed. I mentioned it earlier, it's giving your garden different levels, and I think it works so well. And then last but by no means least is this outdoor kitchen. This concrete countertop I made in June last year, and it's still holding up fantastically. I'm so happy with the way it's turned out. And this has been through 0 degrees Celsius all the way up to 40 degrees Celsius, and it's been absolutely fine. So this is still to date one of the best things that I've made, and I couldn't be happier with it. I also added in the frame to sit it on, and this sort of timber sheathing, this decking sheathing, and it's got the barbecue, and pulling that out gives you access to the gas bottle underneath. Adding this outdoor kitchen was one of the defining factors in the sale of this house, and the real estate agent said that to me as well as a few other people. This gave this property so much more value, and even though it wasn't particularly expensive to add, it gave this property that edge over a lot of the other properties, because this type of house, there's a lot of them in the area, but all of them are pretty outdated and a bit bland. This just gave the house that modern edge, and I think this is one of the things that really pushed people over the line in terms of actually buying this property. And then if we come through this timber gate that I made a video about, I'll stick you guys up here. This carport was the last thing that was built onto this house. This wasn't actually me. I mean, I helped with the build, but for the most part it was done with a building contractor. Before this, it was just a patch of grass that ran through. Actually, no, let me take a step back. Before this, it was concrete, which I then got rid of for the dog that I got, put down grass. Turned out the dog had a grass allergy, so she couldn't ever come out here. So I got the concrete truck out, threw down some concrete, and just built this basic lean-to structure. It's a pretty simple build, and it didn't take very long at all. But what's been so nice is it's added an extra functional area to the house. Whereas before this was just nothing. There was a clothesline here, and that was it. So extending the reach of what you can do is just invaluable. So this was, again, one of the real, in my opinion, one of the real selling points. Most houses in this area like this would have this type of structure. So to try and sell the house without this would have really, really hurt the pocket. All of the last project videos that you saw would have been done in this carport. At the moment, it's a total mess because the moving truck is coming on Monday, and that's why you don't see any tools out. They're all in their boxes ready to go. But a couple of weeks ago, there was a big bench in here. All the tools were set up. And as my first workshop, I can categorically say that having a workshop is great. I wouldn't say it's fundamental, but it's just one of the best feelings you can have, to have a dedicated space to working. The actual structure itself is made of steel posts. Everything else is timber. Then it's zinc along the roof, and then I've got this one strip of clear polycarbonate which just lets a little bit of light in here during the day. This video took a lot longer to create than I thought it would. I started 3 weeks ago, and in 4 days time, on Monday, the movers come to collect all of the stuff and take it out. I'd plan on getting it out a bit sooner, but you know, because I'm moving house, stuff just got in the way. I'm a bit sad to be leaving. It is a bit bittersweet, but one of the nicest things about this house is it's taught me so many new skills. And without having a house and being forced into doing that, I don't know if I ever would have necessarily had this opportunity. So if you made it this far into the video, congratulations. I know it's been a bit of a long one. If you have any questions about the changes that I've made to this house, please feel free to ask them below. By the time you see this, I won't actually be in the house. I'll be in Townsville already, but definitely go ahead and ask away. I'll be happy to talk to you about all the work that I've done. So thanks for watching, guys. This was a tour of my first house, the first home I've ever owned. And while it's no longer my home now, I'm obviously going to continue to make project videos, and as soon as I move into my new home where I have a nice new workshop, I will do another tour and we can start this process all over again.